Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. Today I have some terrifying encounters that I'm just dying to share with you. Also, a kind of brief update, fill in, whatever you want to call it. We'll get to that. But now the links. As you know, I rely on my Patreon, my PayPal, and my merch store to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Those links are in the description below. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1, 2, and 3, the audiobook version. They were written by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeffrey Nadolny. They're available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes. The links are in the description as well. Now, I've taken enough of your time. Let's get on with today's upload. Shall we? Let's start today's upload with some really good news. Actually, great news. Well, about 2.5, 3 months ago, my friend and your friend Victor went silent for a while. He had retired and wanted to spend time with his family. Periodically, I'd send him a text just to wish him happy holidays or say hi. Nothing major, nothing in detail, haven't spoken to him. Today, I sent him a text, and we spoke for about 2 hours. Really great conversation. He sounds well, he's doing well. Mentally, physically, just sounds great. And he decided that it was time, Wednesday, to share some more experiences with you guys. So, that's what we have to look forward to. And I am looking forward to it because I have no idea what he is going to share with us. All I know is it's going to be good. So, on with the encounters. Today's first part of the upload. My family had a scary confrontation in 1992 while RVing. We camped near Wind Cave National Park several times while I was a boy, but stopped going in that part of South Dakota after our experience with something unknown. We normally camped in the early summer, but for whatever reason my father decided we'd go a few weeks before I went back to school. We always enjoyed going to Wind Cave and would spend a full day there. We'd then spend the rest of the week around the RV campground. This particular year, we camped further away from Wind Cave, in the vicinity of Hill City, not far from Mount Rushmore. The area was surrounded by thick pine forest and very rugged. It was a Saturday night, very calm around our campsite. Many people had left during the day, so there were a few kids running around. Around 10:30, I decided it was time to go to bed. I was bored and my parents were entertaining another couple. I lied down and turned the radio on while I drifted off to sleep. The only thing I remember next is my mother making lots of noise while inside of the RV. I sat up and watched my father looking for something in a storage bin. The next thing I noticed, he was holding his pistol. I was wide awake now, wondering what was going on. I started to ask, but was quickly told to be quiet from both of them. They were standing by the door when suddenly something slammed into the back of the RV. I thought someone had hit us with a vehicle. The window in the back was smashed, and the curtain was on the floor. I moved towards my parents when again something slammed into the back of the RV. At the same time, a deep, rumbling sound came from the same direction. I never thought my mother could scream so loud. My father raised the pistol and fired through the window opening. We waited quietly for something to happen. Whatever it was must have run off. By that time, someone was yelling from outside, wanting to know what was going on. I think it was someone from the campground. My father went outside to talk to whoever it was. My mother was very scared and visibly shaking. She just grabbed me and squeezed me tight. My father came back into the RV and said we're leaving. He grabbed whatever gear was outside, threw it in the RV, and we were off. None of us talked much as we drove home, which was about a 4-hour drive. A few days later, my mother told me what had happened that night. My parents were just about ready for bed. She said it was about 11:45, and she was cleaning up outside when she noticed something large on 2 legs run from behind the RV into the forest. My father told her it was probably just a bear. Then he saw it duck out, then back into the woods. There wasn't much light other than that from the lantern in the back window from the RV. He told her that it was no bear. By that time, they were in the RV and heard deep guttural grunts coming from the creature. My father then slowly opened the door. It was standing no more than 10 feet away, looking directly at him. He quickly slammed the door shut and went looking for the pistol. My father has never said much about whatever it was. He described it as being covered head to toe with thick, dark hair, piercing yellow eyes that glowed in the light. He estimated it to be well over 6 feet and weighing at about 400 pounds with huge arms and legs. That's basically all he ever said. He refuses to talk to anyone else about it. We continued camping over the years, but we never went back to that area. Today's second part of the upload. I'm from Roswell, New Mexico, born and raised. I grew up dealing with bullshit alien nonsense my entire life. I'm a very logical thinker, and have had many strange things happen to me in the past, but I've always dealt with them in the this can logically be explained mindset since I can remember. But what I'm about to say about is something I cannot explain, and it is also something I am hesitant to even think about anymore. I was camping with my cousin Cam, 17 at the time, same age as I was, his little brother Nick, 13, and my aunt and uncle. We were near Cloudcroft, New Mexico, up in the mountains, Lincoln National Forest. My uncle had just bought a new camper, and we decided to go camping for the weekend. The weather was beautiful, and me and my cousins decided to bring a tent to sleep instead of the camper, so we could be in peace. We set up our tent about 60 yards away from the camper and the fire that was right outside of it. Towards the end of the first night, and after a long day of exploring, we all decided to lie down for the night. We were not camping on actual campsite. It was a spot my uncle had found some years back, and it was a perfect spot to set up camp. At about 3 a.m, the fire was completely out. My cousins and I were still awake. Nick, being the youngest, was trying to stay up to be cool with us, but ended up falling asleep. It was only Cam and myself awake now. We were just shooting the shit, talking about chicks and school and brilliant ideas for things that needed to be invented, and eventually, slowly started to fall asleep as well, when all of a sudden we heard a blood-curdling scream from the distance, probably the same distance away the camper was, only in the opposite direction. Myself and Cam both picked our heads up off the pillow and said almost simultaneously, "What the hell was that?" It wasn't a bear, it was not a fox, it was big. The closest way I know how to describe it is a mixture between a banshee and a rabid peacock. Its voice was deep and echoed through the deep woods. It let out another blood-curdling shriek, and we both sat straight up on our blown-up mattresses. Immediately after that screech, it started clicking, an odd, deep clicking sound coming from the back of its throat. It was loud enough to hear from the distance. We were scared, and neither of us had any idea what it could be. We waited a second, both quiet as a mouse. It let out another scream, followed by a series of clicks, but it seemed to be closer now, maybe 10 yards closer. I looked at Cam, and he looked just as shocked as I was feeling. I was trying to convince myself it was a bird of some sort, or a mountain cat. Then I heard it walking. It was walking on 2 feet, and I could distinctly hear it. It even sounded big, taking huge strides, cracking branches and leaves under its feet as it walked. It sounded like it was coming close to us. It screeched, clicked loudly again. I could tell it was about halfway to us now. Suddenly, another scream, clicks, came from another direction. Standing just as close as the other creature, it sounded more aggressive, more angry, and dominant. The first creature then let off a series of clicks as well, then it hit me. They were communicating. At this point I was terrified, and so was Cam. I had an axe under my blown-up mattress, but I was afraid to get up and grab it. Then both the creatures started walking toward us, both on two legs. Not screaming or clicking, but it sounded like they were trying to sneak up on the tent. They were getting closer and closer. The first one screamed loudly. I could tell it was roughly 15 yards away now, and so was the other creature. After screaming, it started clicking again, and the other one clicked back at it. They were both walking closer and closer to the tent. I could hear them both stepping on limbs and leaves, but I could feel the ground thud each time they took a step. I was panicking, frantically looking for my axe, while Cam was frantically trying to wake up the little brother. I couldn't find my axe anywhere. I realized I had left it near the campfire because we were using it to cut pieces of firewood for the fire. Nick was not waking up, and they were getting closer and closer to the tent. Eventually, Cam and I froze. The second one had stopped about 10 feet away from the tent, but the first one was walking right up to the tent. As soon as it was right outside of the tent, I yelled as loud as I could out of pure fear. "Get the blanking F away from us. Leave us alone." It stopped. It was right outside. I could almost see it through the tent. It was huge, tall enough to lean over and look through the top of the tent if it wanted to. I could tell it was slim, humanoid, and heavy. I could feel its energy, and it was very negative. I felt the vibes of the universe, and they were telling me that whatever these things were, they were not here to say hi or to steal our hot dogs. I was frozen with fear. They were right outside, and the moon was covered by clouds, so the moonlight was no longer shining anywhere. I couldn't even hear it breathing. It was silent. The second one clicked from behind us, still 10 feet away, or so from the tent. The first did not move. It didn't make a single sound, and it was probably a foot away from the tent. My heart was beating so hard that I thought I was going to pass out, when all of a sudden, it took 2 huge steps back, and the second took off into the woods. After letting out a scream so loud it hurt my ears, immediately burst into tears. As it ran, it was pounding the ground underneath it. The first one apparently turned around and walked away back into the deep woods. I waited until I completely heard footsteps disappear, and then unzipped the tent. I threw little Nicky over my shoulder, and we booked it toward the camper. We got inside and woke up my aunt and uncle. They had no idea what was going on and urged us to take our asses to bed. We slept in the camper the next 2 nights, and I didn't leave the campsite for the rest of the trip. I don't know what we encountered that night, but all I do know is it was not an animal. And it was not human, not a bear or a 4-legged animal. It was the scared as I have ever been, and its energy and screams still haunt me to this day. I give you my word, this is very real. I didn't find any proof to back up my story. However, one thing I did find really strange was the fact that there was a huge rock at the end of the trail near our campsite that was absolutely covered in moss. The last day we were there, all of the moss on that rock was gone. I couldn't even recognize the rock until little Nick said something about it. The rock looked like it had been licked clean. Not literally, but there wasn't a sign of moss on that thing. Just 2 days prior, the moss was so thick that it looked like a couch cushion. Today's third part of the upload. So this happened about 2 or 3 years ago in central Maine area, which in this area is very thick woods. My dad is a Maine guide, and he isn't someone to believe in anything like this. He's a very rational, sane person and doesn't jump to conclusions. So anyway, he and 2 or 3 other guides were out on a training mission for bear hunting with dogs. They were running the dogs for a good 2 hours or so, called the dogs back and decided to try another place, which was nearby to another of the bear baits. They let the dogs go and they start running into the woods, but still in eyesight, and all of a sudden start acting extremely weird. The dogs start cowering and backing up, which of course is not normal for dogs that are trained for big game. The group of hunters there have never seen any dog act like this. They seemed truly scared of what was beyond the tree line. But it gets weirder. They see a good-sized treetops about 100 yards or so in the distance start shaking as whatever it was making its way through the thick woods. There was cracking and snapping of trees on for a good 20 to 30 seconds before you couldn't see or hear anything anymore. Of course, they thought it couldn't have been a moose making such a ruckus, but the trees were massive that were being moved, and it wouldn't explain the dogs acting the way they did. My old man is the smartest person I've ever met when it came to the Maine woods, and has been in this particular area his whole life, and a Maine guide 40 plus years, and has never seen anything like this, not to mention the others that were there. When everything calmed down, they tied the dogs up and made their way in. There were many broken branches, and the only tracks were found were going down a semi-steep hill where it was sandy enough to get an imprint of some sort. He said it didn't look hooved. There were huge tracks, but hard to make out a full print due to whatever it was sliding down the hill. They talked about it for a while, and one of his friends that was there had a game camera set up nearby. He was hoping he caught it on film. Unfortunately, there was nothing, and must have went in the opposite direction. Today's fourth part of the upload. I live in northeast Ohio, and my house is directly in front of about 200 to 300 acres of woods. I used to explore it all the time. I had a strange encounter about 2 years ago when I was making a trip through a part of the woods I had been in at least 100 times. I've always had a thing for the outdoors, so I'm pretty familiar with the part of it. It was myself and my cousin, who was only a year younger than I, and we both had knives and little bullshit we liked to mess with in the woods. It was the middle of the day, and we heard a coyote yipping about 20 to 30 yards out. So I made me and him climb a tree to avoid them, because coyotes around here are mean, and we weren't properly armed. We climbed the tree and watched the pack run past, not too far away. They seemed panicked, like they were running from something, so I watched closely as my cousin covered his eyes because he was scared. Then something large came running behind them. It looked like a large dog, but impossibly large, like the size of a small bear. It was jet black except for its eyes. They were a weird shade of green, but to be honest, I'm not 100% sure. I didn't get a great look. I asked my cousin about it later, but he didn't see anything. It didn't seem super strange until I started looking into cryptids and stuff, and I'm curious if this lines up with anything else anybody's ever seen. Today's fifth part of the upload. I live in Chattanooga, Tennessee, just a few minutes away from Harrison Bay. This year I started with 4 cats and would let them roam around outside and they would always come back when it got dark. One of them didn't come back in one day, and we didn't think much of it, other than he must have wanted to stay out longer, and would let him in the first thing in the morning. After a week of no sign of them, we gave up, and thought maybe a stray dog or a wild animal or something got her. We kept a close eye on the cats from then on, but didn't have any problems until a couple months later, when another one disappeared. We now only let a single cat out who is older and meaner and can protect himself, and even then he comes back in before it gets dark. Now, that being of my encounter is the last night, December 28th, 2018. I was driving home from work, and the closer I got to my house, the thicker this strange mist became. I came inside after feeling a little uneasy and went to bed after making sure both cats were inside and accounted for. I woke up at 3 a.m. to the sounds of a cat making an often wailing sound outside my front door. It sounded almost like a siren from how it rose and fell in pitch. I looked to make sure my cats were okay, and they were huddled up under my TV stand, looking terrified at the front door, where the wailing was coming from, and I listened closer, and the wailing sounded off. It sounded like a wail on the surface, but had a guttural growl undertone, and I felt a strong urge to open the door, but then I had the feeling tell me, don't open it. I smacked the door instead, and the thing made a loud garbling growl sound as it scampered away. I then went to lie back down, around 3:30 at this point, and it started back up outside my bedroom window at this point. This time, however, it would wail, then make a sound like it was fighting another cat, but there was only a creature making the noise, and it went back on the loop of wailing. At around 4 a.m, it came to a stop. When I came outside in the morning to go to work, there was white fluff all over the ground. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed tonight's upload. Sorry it's a little shorter than normal. I'm a little off tonight. Tomorrow is Dad's 3rd surgery, so my head is not exactly where it needs to be tonight. I apologize. I am very excited about Wednesday though, and I hope you guys are as well. So with that, I want to thank everybody and bid everyone a farewell, and see you guys tomorrow definitely. See ya!